El Payo, a fetty wap trafficker for the Beltran labor cartel sanctioned by the U.S., has been arrested. Juan Pablo Bastidas Erenas was arrested in Sinaloa and faces charges in the Southern District of California, United States of America. All right, there's his picture right there. They barred up his eyes. Like, we're not going to recognize him if you got a bar over his eyes and shit. El Payo was sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department in December 2023. Federal authorities arrested Juan Pablo N., alias El Payo, in Sinaloa, a member of the Beltran labor cartel, allegedly involved in drug trafficking to the United States, where he faces charges for this crime. The arrest of El Payo resulted from a search warrant executed at a property in Los Mochis, where he had been hiding from authorities. Thanks to a supervisory judge who authorized the search, federal forces entered the home in the early hours of May 28th. Inside the house, located on South Llorón Street, inside the house, located on South Llorón Street in the Jardines del Bosque neighborhood, the arrest warrant was executed against said subject for trafficking fetty wap and method man. 2 personalized hammers were also seized in the home, apparently decorated with gold. One of them features the figure of 4 men on the slide, a possible reference to Beltran labor brothers Arturo, Alfredo, Carlos, and Hector. The other has an Aztec calendar on the grip. Right? These are the images of the pretty little fancy. All right, boom. There you got both of them right there. The calendar. Let's get it. I'm going to continue. According to security sources, El Payo is a member of the Beltran labor cartel involved in the trafficking of synthetic rugs to the United States. He operates for 2 high-ranking officials in the organization, Oscar Manuel Gastela Mirribe, alias El Músico, and Fausto Isidro Meza Flores, alias Chapo Isidro. The 3 criminal members were sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department on December 6, 2023, along with 12 other Mexicans directly or indirectly linked to the Beltran labor organization. According to the Treasury Department records, El Payo was born on March 11, 1980, in Sinaloa. In 2021, he and Josue Estrada Gutierrez, another Beltran labor member, invested in a rug shipment that resulted in a record seizure of method man and fetty wap made by Customs and Border Protection at the Otay Mesa port of entry. Now we have here a Beltran labor organization breakdown, a map of, I guess, people and their power. Okay, and then it says, due to its magnitude, the operation was dubbed Zilla. That might be the new name for meth around here. At the time, the rugs were linked to the Beltran Labor Network, an organization that severed ties with the Sinaloa cartel in 2008. Under the command of Gaston Iribe, the group has been implicated in rug trafficking from Colombia, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Honduras, and Guatemala. In Mexico, its area of operation includes Quintana Roo, Chiapas, Oaxaca, Guerrero, and Sinaloa. Trafficked rugs are distributed within the United States, particularly in California, Arizona, Oregon, Washington, Illinois, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Massachusetts.
When was it? A couple of weeks ago, out of San Diego, where they were the first group that were charged with the FTO designation from the federal government. I believe he's on that indictment out of San Diego.
The United States will bring new charges against El Chapito, El Maldito Flaco, El Pelo Chino, El Chapo Isidro, El Músico. That one?
Yeah, he's in that indictment.
Okay.
On that one actually. You could just reference it here. But going back to Payo, I would tell you like this. Look, no matter what, where I am in life, like things don't change. You know what I mean? Man, Payo's the first person I met when I went to Sinaloa to rescue my brother. Um, they introduced me to him, and the minute they introduced me to him, we clicked. And it was his house that we actually would use as a meeting point. When I was in the process of rescuing my brother, right before I met everyone, and the minute he met me, he was young as well. He just vouched for me, and back then he wasn't really like involved. It was his older brother, and I'm gonna guess that maybe his older brother was has died or something because no one mentions him, and his older brother was the one that was like really involved in drug trafficking for various organizations. They were actually the fleteros, which were people who moved the drugs from in and around Mexico, and they had transport in the United States. And um, we met, and we we connected like right away. And from the day that we first met, I came back to his house the next day, and he welcomed me, and we became inseparable. He became my right hand man in Mexico, and it worked out great. Because as I was like moving up in the cartel, he was like the one that would actually fill me in. And I remember I would laugh because people would come and talk to me, and they'll be like, "Twin, this and that," and I'll act like I know him, and I'll turn to him and I'll be like, "Who is that?" And he'll be like, "It's so and so, so and so." I'm like, "Oh, okay," like, and he lived with us as well. Like everywhere where I'd go, he'd go. Um, and I just he was never like back then. He wasn't a person that was like really involved, but he was always like in the middle, uh, for the Beltran labels at that time for Musico. And it's sad to me, after like 17 years, um, to see that he was, just arrested. And after everything that I've been through, I mean, I'm glad that he's alive, but I'm also like disappointed that it continued on, especially him, being around me for so long, and him knowing that I chose to walk away from that life, and that he didn't think of doing the same early on before he was you know n- not as involved as he is today, I guess. uh, but he also worked with another organization that was which was the Pedro. I think the last name is Insusa. Am I correct? I don't know, sure, if you know. Yo,
Pedro Nzunza,
yeah, Pedro
Sagitario.
Insusa. So I'll give you some backstory. And Payo and his brother, they were like made like the transport for various organizations, but mainly it was gonna be for mine and for Pedro, and Pedro had a partner who I don't see being mentioned, which was Chorizo. So I'm gonna guess either he's in prison or dead. Um, and because of them, we kind of worked collectively together, and they were major um buyers and distributors for the Sinaloa cartel, but specifically for the Beltran Leyvas. And um, early on, when the fight started, Pedro was one of the first casualties. And when he was targeted by the Sinaloa cartel in an ambush, if I recall this correctly, he was in a bulletproof truck with his son, and they end up attacking him, and they got in a high speed chase, but he ended up stopping, and he got off the truck because his son was in the truck, his like 5-year-old son. And he basically like said, I guess kill me or whatever. But he had took some bullets, and they kidnapped him, and they took him, and they put him on a plane, and took him to see Chapo. And Chapo interrogated him, and from my understanding, Pedro had a family member that was by marriage to Chapo, and that family member like begged for his life, and Chapo agreed and spared his life and sent him to see a doctor. But he was paralyzed, and I got to see him through a video, through like a Zoom. I'm not sure what we used back then, but through a Zoom or something, while he was actually recuperating. Because we would do business with him here and there, and I guess his nickname ended up being El de la CIA. So this was back then. But Bayo and his brother worked directly with him, and and you know, just to know what's coming for him, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up, here in the U.S. courtroom next week. Especially with that indictment that was recently uh, released, and you know, most likely that tells you that someone, really close and someone really important to that organization is actually cooperating, and that's where they're getting all this information for them to be able to make an arrest like that so fast. Yeah, but I mean, on a personal matter, it just, it's sad. Understanding that he's the first organization being, targeted with the FTO. It's like, what's coming to him, Shai. It's not gonna be easy. It's gonna be a long time.
I don't
And
know, man. Maybe it's easy. Maybe he do 6, he go home. His whole family come over here. They live in Disneyland. Who knows? Anything's possible nowadays. No.
I and you know what?
Don't we?
I
Don't
and
we negotiate with terrorists at this point?
Yeah, if I recall this, I think it was Cartel Wives where we talk about my friend had a baby as well, and we had like a pizza party. Do you recall that?
I don't recall. I don't remember. It's been a lot since then.
Well, it was him. It was him and his family, and I'm gonna say really good people. And over the years, I've heard of different people that he never stopped, just talking, highly about us, and probably just more understanding. I do understand that there's a couple incidents where he really he could have done a lot worse, and chose to do, the better thing that was going to be for me and my family, and that always, stood with me. So yeah, it's unfortunate just to see him get arrested and see his picture popped up, and it saddened me, uh, that he wasn't able to make it out that life. In a way, it's like, okay, in a way, it was like I was happy he was still alive,
Oh,
but
so you
then
didn't know? You didn't know? What was his status really? Yeah, until
nah,
you seen this article.
especially with everything that's been going on, is like, you just never know. But just it's weird because after all these years, like, a couple, months ago, early on, when was it, like last year, and I think it was September, October, when Tano and Ricardo the Garcia brothers were killed, and then recently Leo, he was arrested. And it's like a part of me is like, damn, it's these are two people that were relevant, back then, that were relevant today, that were part of, my own drug trafficking organization, and either through friends or through the business. And then after all this time to still see this continue, it's like, um it's like, just makes me realize how blessed I am as well.
Somebody said something in the chat the other day that makes perfect sense. The Bartel game is about secession, and everybody got a successor in place. We let's just say the guy that we're talking about, Payo, he had a faction, right, an organization. Does his business continue running? Do
Well,
all of these little businesses just
I
continue
would tell
running?
you something. Even when
Is
I
it
still
or
remember, like,
or is it a stupid question? You could tell me that too. You know what I'm saying?
well, I just think it's nothing that's planned, bro. I want to make sure in everything I've
Hmm.
lived in every type of organization. It was my brother's organization, just, my father's. I will tell you, what always happens is that people who are involved that don't get arrested or something think, oh, I could just do what he was doing and pick it up.
Right.
And then it continues to move forward. But it's not like it's like a crown, just
Right. It's
okay.
a different thing at that point. It's no longer the same thing that it
It's
was.
no longer the same thing. You could see it with Chapo and his sons.
Right.
Like, that's them. You know what I mean? Like, and so forth. But even with Musico, like, I don't think, like, even for me, I feel like the organization as you see it today, I don't think it's the Beltran Labor organization, and they frame it that because
The
it
main.
was what's left behind, right? The last people. But everything that you hear stories about him, he's always tried to like run it differently, like his own organization, because man, it got wiped out. He was like one of the last few that survived him and Chapo Isidro. And you hear the stories about the meetings where he said he didn't want to be no part of it, fighting and stuff like that. But I just think that, to the government or to us, we're like, oh, that's what's left of the Beltran Labor Organization. But for him, I just think, I'm not sure, especially today, with this indictment, and who knows what's gonna happen to that organization, what's gonna be the what's gonna be left of it. But um, it wouldn't surprise me if someone tries to fill that void. It's been the common theme for so many years.
Again, at that point, it's a different animal. Maybe that guy
Yeah, I
ain't.
think it's just a different organization. You get me?
Yeah,
Right?
that
Like,
guy probably ain't the leader this guy was, and
yeah.
he who knows
So
how
I want
compartmentalized he was, and
I want to make it clear. I don't think Payo was a leader. I think he was
apart.
a part of it, someone important in that organization, but I don't know if he was a leader or not. You know, and I will tell you something. Here's some insight. Here's an inside story about him. I think I said this in a podcast where when they basically started drawing the line of like who was who, um, and I remember getting that call with to one of the big lieutenants for the my organization, and they had me on speaker, and they called and said, we have you on speaker, and that's it. You get me? No more fucking playing games. Um, from now on, any time we catch one of these guys or we catch anyone, right? We're gonna we're gonna get rid of them. And he like that goes for you too. And I'll never forget. I'm on. I have it on speaker, and he's right next to me. And
Wait, who's right next to you?
Payo.
Bio's right next to you, and then the you're on the phone with the Beltran Leyvas.
No, no, it's the Sinaloa Cartel with Miles' organization.
Oh,
They tell me that Miles listening,
mm.
and he says, "I'll never forget this." He said, "Hey," he said, "What's up with your little friend?" And I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Your little friend Payo and his brother." And he said that I'll never forget. I looked at Payo. He was white as a ghost. He shrunk. He said, he said, "We want him. We want him now." He said, "Where is he?" I said, and I just said, "Oh, he's in." When he heard of everything that was going on with the war and stuff, he fled to Arizona. He went back to the United States and with his family. Like, yeah, of course he did. He said, "Does he call you?" I said, "Yeah, I talk to him all the time." He said, "Well, try to get him to come down and see you, so we could kill his ass." And I was like, "Yes, sir." I don't think he'll come, but because he just left, but I'll sure try. He's okay, he told me in Spanish, like, ahí te dejo ese encargadito, aquí está el señor. Y ya le dije, he's like listening to you saying that you're going to do it. And I'm like, all right. And I remember he looked at me, he said, "What the fuck?" And I kind of know why that happened. I feel like I, I mean, I'm taking responsibility for it just because I felt responsible at the time. I mean, he's in the game. It's not my fault. But all those time he was with me sometimes, um, and if it was people that didn't know, like, and he was gonna come with me somewhere, and I'd be like, "Man, he's with me." Sometimes they'll be like, "Let me make a call. Let me make sure," and then he'll tell them, "Who are you?" You know, and he'll tell them who he was, and then the next thing you know, they'll be like, "Cuates boy, El Payo." You get me? For that side of the organization, they didn't know him. So I kind of like burned them up and then when everything started, it's like, oh, we know whose friend is that. So
We gotta in at him. We know
yeah,
how to get at him. There's no way you lied to the bosses like that. I mean, you mean you were built like that to lie to the bosses? You had a guy sitting next to you looking like a ghost in the face, but you lied to the bosses? Oh, man. Who would have thunk it, bro?
shit. I'm gonna tell you when it comes, it's weird because look, Shai, you know what? I think this is something we could talk about. I think I have this thing in my mind for such a long time. I don't know if we ever touched on it that in Mexico, especially in that life, I don't know if it's the same here in America, but there's so many songs even, okay, written about friends and compadres. All right, like there was this famous song right now. It was called, "Tu Compadre" or whatever, and they were saying there was like a gay song about this guy. Maybe you correct someone in the chat. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know nothing about it.
Um, what's it called? It's called "Amigo" or something like that. "Mi compadre" or something like that. And there's so many songs made about friendships, Shy.
Mm.
especially in that narco world. Since I was a kid, there's been songs about their compadres, and it's like I could be in events where they will play the songs about having that compadre, having that friend, that right hand man. And I believe just because it was, the narco culture having to like lean on one person and the other,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that it resonated with so many people. I don't see that really in American music. One of the most famous songs which I really love a lot is the Mark Anthony song. It's called Amigo.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
No, I don't even know that song.
Amigo?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, it's an amazing song. Mark Anthony sings it, and it just talks about like he's dedicating this song to his friendship with his friend who's always been there for him.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's like it's common. I think it's like war kind of ish, like
Mm-hmm.
narco war, narco, right hand man, and I get it because seeing like at the end of the day, it's like man, he was my friend. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would you do for a friend? And I think
Right.
my brother says it all the time. It's like they put you in a situation where you have to either kill your friend or
Mm-hmm.
snitch on them.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that that was just a reason, but I'm gonna tell you, like snitching on someone and hoping that they make that decision. We'll see what he does, later. But it's beats, setting someone up and just to make sure that you're okay with, the boss is gonna be okay. I lie to him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. And it's weird because yeah, I'm putting my life on the line by lying to them, but they also, like it's what the game was. It's what we keep talking about,
It's the
right?
cat and mouse game. Everybody lying to each
Mhm.
other. Everybody betraying each other. If you play your p's and q's wrong that day, it costs you your life.
I will tell you something. When when I looked at him that day
Mm-hmm.
and I was lying, I remember that thought going through my mind, like we had a couple guys with us that day, but I'm like, do they know? Why is he asking me? To like, you're thinking like,
Right?
do
Do
they
they
have
do
a
they see
camera?
this? Do
You know,
they see
like,
this motherfucker sitting 6 inches from me right now?
yeah, like for real, because I explained to you about the story with Echo, how they had their phones tapped and they knew. And I always used to be like, nah, they can't, they ain't gonna have my phone tapped, like that, because I switched too
Mm-hmm.
many phones and I'm on top of that, but that thought did go through my head.
Amongst other things, I'm sure that's a moment where a whole bunch of shit gonna run through your head.
I remember that after we hung up, we hugged each other, and he like, no, cabrón.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I feel like after that time, like when that happened, and once he heard that, he started getting a little bit like I started to see a part of him that I didn't see before, and we had a couple. Like one time, I had to really, really like bitch him out,
Mm-hmm.
because he was always with me, so he was always seeing me like talk to different people, and he knew what game we were playing, and I would let him know, and he understood it like 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And at one time, you know, he came with me, or we're in a situation where I end up having a meeting with some really high family members and high-ranking members of the Valencias, of the low Valencias, and they said something that he didn't like, and they were supplying like weapons at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when, I was too busy in the meeting, and when I stepped to the side, he said, you know, how long do you think we got till we leave? And I'm like, I don't know, we'll leave like in 20 minutes. He said, you think you could wait 30 minutes? And I said, why? He said, because I just made a phone call, and I could get a good group of guys, so when we leave, they could come smoke all these motherfuckers.
Hmm.
And then I remember I looked at him. That's the first time I ever like bitched him out.
And motherfucker, we
Uh,
playing a different game. I don't know what the fuck you
and
looking at.
I said, if that's the game you're gonna play without me, you get me?
Mm-hmm.
Like just don't let me know, because what you think they don't know that we're here together? Like they don't know we're having a meeting. We leave and something happens to them, who they're gonna blame? Me, and then my family's gonna be.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, I'm telling you the nice version of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I end up bitching him out, like mad at him, not just because he would put me in a situation like that, that he would put himself in the situation, you know. I was like, come on, whatever I found, you're not thinking, you know. And I remember telling him, like, you want to figure it out, you're smart enough, figure it out a better way than using me, you know, like,
Right.
come on, bro, like.
Right.
And I
This is
remember,
you reaching for the low hanging fruit right here. You
like,
thirsty.
you're making it too easy. You get
Yeah,
me?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
come on. If you really wanted to, you know, like I'm really about shy. Like, look, if you really want to, you could do it. You know, you could try, but don't use me. And because he, even though he was my right hand man, you know, he still had his, you know, like he still was working with the Beltran labels. You get me? He worked directly for them, and it's like it kind of worked in my favor, but at the same time it was that. But regardless, we had a friendship. I never forget. He's like, nah, wait. He ended up telling me in Spanish, like, perdóname, cabrón. You know, nah, like he told me like, la regué allí, güey. Neta que sí. You know. Yeah, it's sad. It's unfortunate. You know, that's just the way that the business is, and feelings, and you know. I guess maybe because it's hard not having feelings. You get me? You know, today, like, it's just I feel bad, but it's like back then, it's like you start, like, that was our biggest thing where we would worry about people, and then it comes to a time where these things were even added to be like, you know what, I'm gonna keep putting my life, you know, in someone else's hand that don't, you know what I'm saying? You imagine, like, without thinking, in a second of emotional, you know, um, anger.
No, there's a bunch of years there where everybody involved had basically a nuke button over their head every day, and it could be
Mhm.
you.
Yeah. So I guess that's something that doesn't really, you don't hear much about is the emotion side, or the, you know, why things happen and stuff like that. But again, that's, I guess, a PSA, right, of what's coming for the rest of the drug traffickers, right? And we're gonna see it play out. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in a U.S. courtroom by the end of next weekend.
That's crazy, boy. And again, we've seen the precedent set. They already done it. They've already took a bunch of dudes that they locked up and put them on the next thing flying out of there, boy.